Welcome to Fleet Safety Geeks. I'm Bob.
And I'm Phil, and we welcome you to our podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Fleet Safety Geeks. I am here with Phil Mosier, and we have special guest Bethany Brownholtz from Truce Sofware. Bethany, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Um, so you're from Truce Software, and you've been listening to our podcast, and it seems like you've kind of enjoyed what you're hearing.
I'm a bit of
And
a
you,
fangirl, yes.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we love it. And you had reached out to us saying that you wanted to interview us. So we're actually doing a podcast of you interviewing us, and we're pretty excited about that.
I'm so pumped. Thanks for being willing.
Yeah, for sure. Before we go, so everybody and our listeners and watchers know who you are, can you introduce your company and yourself?
Sure. So I'm Bethany. I'm a marketing campaign manager for Truce Software, and we specialize in basically mobile device distraction in the workplace. So whatever's around a device ends up determining what's on the device. So we use like context sensing technology to reduce employee risk and improve productivity. So we're serving up the right applications to the right user at the right time. So that means anywhere where there's like a risky work environment, like on the road, for example, or construction site or warehouse, we're helping to reduce those digital distractions.
No, that sounds great. Is it an app on a phone or is it on any electronic device, or how does that work?
It's any mobile device, so tablet or phone, and it's installed on the devices.
Okay. Um, Phil, we've had no cell on, and it seems like it's maybe a similar thing there, but it's kind of neat your how you're using it, Bethany, with construction sites, probably maybe trucking companies and other things. That seems like it would be really useful.
Yeah, so any kind of high risk working environment it can apply. So we have like geofencing or time of day, different contextual factors that also are combined with the company policy to then enforce that policy in different environments. So it's dynamic and can change across the workday depending on what the user is doing, where they are, what's going on around them.
Right. No, that's great. Phil and I we like to talk about changing driver behavior, following policy. Basically, we say put your phone down and don't be an idiot. But we know that technology is going to come into play and assist with some of this, and it's probably necessary. And
Yeah.
any manufacturer of a vehicle should have something in there that doesn't allow a phone to be used. Phones should be automatic to not be used. But if we have to put this app or the software on, I think that's a very valuable tool. So that's great. You have any
Yeah,
thoughts on
totally.
that, Phil? I don't want to say all the talking here.
Oh no, that's fine. No, I like the idea that it's just not addressing, that it's addressing all workplace. And Bethany, I was really glad to hear you say about the driving workplace. Right, a lot of times people
Yeah.
don't realize, that for a lot of, for many of the people that we um, are doing this for are the people who have to drive as part of their job, and that is their workplace, and it is the most dangerous workplace in the country.
Mhm.
I mean, it truly is, and it's often forgotten that that is a workplace and just the risks involved with that. People who have really risky jobs, they probably have more of a risk driving to their workplace than they do when they're at work, because the safeguards are put in place there. But what about when they're driving? So I'm glad to hear that you're
Mhm.
addressing all workplaces, including driving.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's great. So now that we know who you are and who Truce is, I think that's great. You're welcome to move on to whatever you want if you have any questions for us.
Yes, yes. So, well, you got to clear this up for me. What's the difference between a fleet safety nerd and a fleet safety geek?
I think a fleet safety nerd has a pocket protector. Do we still talk about pocket protectors? I don't know. But
No.
no, a fleet safety geek is just people who geek out talking about stuff they really enjoy talking about.
Yeah, totally. So, with that in mind, how did you both get into safety and what about safety stuck for you?
Phil, you start there. You really introduced it to me, and I'm a fanboy of you, Phil.
Oh, God. Well, I was a police officer, and my training that I received on the police department was in reconstructing car crashes. So I was the guy that got called out for any of the
Wow.
more severe crashes. You know, if it was a fatal or what might become a fatal, I got called, and it didn't take long for me to understand the importance of this. And then I got involved in doing corporate safety training, and for different organizations, and that's how I met Bob. So,
Ah.
Yeah, and I've been managing fleets for 23 years now. And safety has always been an important part of fleet management. Um, I started with Safelight in Columbus, and we had a like a fleet safety committee. We would I don't know if that's exactly what it was called, but what we did is we would write safety policy,
Mhm.
partnering with the risk department, and we'd travel to the field. We'd involve uh, a local market. We'd spend 3 days with them. They'd help write policy. We'd go over things. So it was always a big part of what we did. Then I went into government fleet, and I managed a police fleet. So I got to see a lot of the police things, and I got to see a lot of the after effects of the accidents. I wasn't out there reconstructing, and I wasn't an officer, but I did see a lot of it, come through either at impound or, going out with some of the sheriff deputies. And then when I went to Steris, where I'm at now, Phil was working with us through the company he was providing services for, and I was just blown away with the training and the level of what Phil would go over. And I just had to sit in on a class. I had to be in the vehicle when they were doing the driving. And a funny story, I was wearing my dress shoes and, not a technician, but I had all the technicians in the van that we were in. And, he would say, go straight down and accelerate as fast as you can and don't brake until I tell you. And
Oh my
so I
God.
went and I'm accelerating, and he's like, okay, stop. And I plow right through the cones. And everybody's in the car like, whoa, the fleet manager can't even stop when he's supposed to. My foot, my dress shoe, got stuck sliding from the gas pedal over to the brake. I didn't lift it up and put it on the brake pedal. I was sliding it over, and the lip of the dress shoe got stuck underneath the brake pedal, and I couldn't lift it up.
Oh my God.
So if nothing else, it was a good thing to kind of, talk about, and, how to lift your foot off a pedal and back onto a pedal and just do that.
Proper
So
shoes.
I will say, Bethany, that after that training class, I went back to work and asked for a raise.
Ah. Oh my God, that's so cool. I was gonna ask how you guys met, so that's a really fun story. So between that and starting the podcast, what made you decide to start a podcast, and more specifically a podcast about fleet safety?
I can take that
well,
one if you want, Bob. No.
yeah, go for it.
So Bob and I would see each other at various trade shows, fleet and safety trade shows. So we were sitting having a beer. We weren't driving, and he we started talking, and Bob said, "Whenever we talk, we always start talking about safety." I said, "Can't help it, Bob. I'm a safety geek." And then we're talking a little longer, and Bob made some comment like, "Well, I've been wanting to do a podcast. We should do a podcast. We'll call it the Safety Geeks." And then, how did you come up with the Fleet Safety Geeks, Bob? I think you.
Yeah, when you said you were a safety geek, I'm like, what a great name for a podcast. So I went out there and tried to find it. Well, I said we should start a podcast, and you're like, okay, probably not thinking it would ever happen. Um,
That's true. A lot of people throw that around.
right. So I went out there to try and see if Safety Geeks was available. It was already taken, but we're in Fleet, so it just became Fleet Safety Geeks. And then I follow up with Phil, and he's like, oh, so we're doing this.
And here you are, so many
Yeah.
episodes later, which is a good segue. I don't know if you can pick favorites, but I'm curious if you have a favorite episode or two and why.
Ah, man, any kind of safety geek talking about safety, all of them would be our favorites. Let's talk about the ones that have performed the best.
Okay.
And Angry Phil is
That is
the
my
one that
favorite.
Phil got on and he's like, he was just fed up. Fatalities are increasing. We can't seem to slow this down. People are still doing the wrong things. And Angry Phil came on and he was just like, we've got to change what we do this country is not strict enough as far as other countries. That is probably the most downloaded episode that we've had.
Mm,
So that seems to be a fan favorite. For me, I really liked, just because I really am about policy and I really think
mm.
that, helping people learn how to, develop a fleet safety policy program. The safety policy series was a lot of fun. We had a lot of special guests on. We had a lot of people that really contributed to that. So that was a fun series for me. But Phil, how about you? Angry Phil, was that your favorite?
Angry Phil was my favorite, and the
I
reason
need to
for
get
it
you
was,
on a rant today.
yeah, really, it wouldn't take much, Bethany. It would not take much.
I know you're from
So,
Philly.
yeah, that's right. That's my Philadelphia attitude, or as they say in Philly, attitude. Um, it's it just irritates me that, and what struck me was that there were different trade shows that were coming up, and fleet trade shows, and safety wasn't on any of the agendas. It was all about the electric vehicles and things like that. And I went, are you kidding me? We are at the highest fatalities rates that we've seen in 19 years. And it's not even part of the agenda. It wasn't even a discussion point. So I got kind of angry about that. And it came through on the podcast. And, listen, we're far too accepting, in my opinion, of safety, of fatalities. Um,
Hmm.
there are other countries that do a far better job than what we do. Impairment, distraction, all these things, they should be a stigma in our society. And I know we're going to talk about distraction because, whew, um, but
Yeah.
it's so rampant. It's ridiculous. So yeah, it wouldn't take much, Bethany, to get me to be angry, Phil, again.
Okay, just
I
wait.
won't Hulk out and turn green, I promise, or anything like that. But yeah, that was my favorite one because I think we were. I mean, not that we're never not honest. We're pretty blunt. I think in this podcast. Let's just say it was a little bit more blunt that day.
Gotcha. Along those same lines, what's something that surprised you or that you've learned in the process of developing the podcast?
We've learned how to be geekier. I've never done a podcast before. We started out with an audio podcast. I had never edited one. I'm not a producer. Phil and I, we're not podcasters. We're not radio people. We're not public speakers, even though Phil, I think, would do a great job public speaking. But um, we just like to chat about safety. But then we realized, oh, we also have to, put this out there so people can listen to it. So I've learned how to be geekier. I've always been kind of geeky with stuff like that. Um, but we went from audio, using my son was 13 at the time when we started this, and he's like, "Oh, you should use Discord," and that's like the
Yeah.
platform that like gamers use to
Yeah.
chat with each other and stuff. But the nice thing about Discord is it did have like a really good recording rate. It was like CD quality audio recording rate. And then I edited it with Audacity, which was a free editing software for audio. But then, everybody's doing like video podcasts as well and putting it out there. And I didn't want just an audio version on YouTube. So I was like, well, let's figure out a way to do video. So now I got to figure out how to do editing of video as well. So if anything else, the techie stuff for me is really what I've learned from this. Um, Phil obviously is very knowledgeable about all things safety.
Yeah.
So hopefully a lot of our listeners or watchers, are picking up a lot of good tips. Phil, how about you?
I guess I was surprised that well, the number of countries where it's listened to. I mean, it's really that struck me as I didn't expect that, but I'm glad to see that that some people are tuning in, and we're getting some good positive feedback from it. But and it's going to sound totally geeky, but that's, hey, appropriately.
Go to town.
If we say one thing in one podcast that one person shares with a driver, or as they learn from for themselves, that saves one crash, it's worth all the effort. I hate
Totally.
crashes. I mean, we both hate crashes because they ruin lives. So that's the whole thing, right? I mean, but it just surprised me that we're in Europe and I think the Middle East. We're seeing people in Africa, and it's just that was a
Yeah,
little
there's a
weird
huge
for me.
need for what you
Yeah,
guys are doing. So
yeah.
thank you
Safe
for
driving is safe driving. I don't care where you are, right?
Yep,
right,
that's right.
right,
That's right.
exactly. So speaking of crashes, in a couple of episodes you talk about, let them come to a crash site and see what it's like and have to call the families, have to knock on the window. It sounds like you've had to do that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how it's changed you?
Yeah. So obviously, my background. I always say if people would go to a crash scene and see it and smell it and hear it, they would change the way they drive. And then so people people have said, well, so you had to go to the to the scenes, and there were people who were dead. Yeah, that's why I was there. And all the autopsies and things like that. But when I'm on the scene, that was like I had a job to do, right? So that you do that, and any cop would tell you this. But the roughest
Mm,
part was then dealing with the families, what I called the living
yeah.
room time. Because when you do a full blown reconstruction, you talk to the family members, and then you do what are called pre-trip events. You find out like what was on with the person 24 hours, 48 hours, even 72 hours prior to the crash. Was there something happening in their lives that may have been a distraction? Were they having health issues? All that. So you get to know the family members. And what I always say is that when I would have to go up and talk to the families, I knew that no matter what I said, it was not going to help them. It wasn't going to make it any better. And it just people learn how to cope with it. Losing a loved one like that, um, but they never get over it. And the thing of it is that that's happening 12 times every hour, and just in the U.S. 12 times every hour, families are having to deal with that. The families and the loved ones and their coworkers and things like that. So, yeah, people would change the way they drive if they saw the results. There are consequences to bad decisions for bad driving. When people are driving.
Yeah. Piggybacking on that, what do you think is the top danger to fleet drivers today on the road?
Pretty easy. Distraction.
Yeah.
People get to where they're going. They don't know how they got there. People are on their phones. You
Mm,
pull up to an intersection, you see people just, they have their phones up, or they have the thing stuck in their ear, and they're talking, and they're certainly not paying attention to the driving. And the problem is during the epidemic, during the pandemic, you know, the only lifeline people had to the outside world was their electronics, and they're addicting. They are absolutely addicting. And people have heard me say this time and again on this podcast. People can't go to the bathroom without their damn phone. I mean, it's ridiculous.
yeah.
And they've not put the phones down now that they're behind the wheel. So I think electronics. I mean, there are other distractions, obviously. Eating. I had a guy pull up behind me the other day when I was driving into work. He had some kind of a giant sandwich in foil wrap, and he was munching on it. And I'm thinking, don't hit me, dude. You know, um, but
No cheesesteak is worth it.
no
I was
cheesesteak.
gonna say it's a Philly cheesesteak.
But the thing of it is that how often do you see that in comparison to how many times you see people using their electronics when driving?
Yeah,
It's
it's
the
culturally accepted.
it is
It's which is
culturally accepted, and that, Bethany, is why Angry Phil came out, was because it should not be culturally accepted. And then the other issue I have is impairment. Impairment is, especially with legalized marijuana use, I have a real concern about how that's all going to play out. It's going to get bad. It's going to get really bad. That's my concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what advice would you give to someone entering the industry as a driver or a safety manager?
Now, Bob, you handle safety, I know. What do you tell your drivers? I mean, I have a my ideas, but
Well, our ideas are probably very similar. Any new driver that comes to our company, we go through new hire orientation. A big portion of that is centered around safety. What to do behind the wheel, what the implications are going to be if you can't follow our policy, and we'll
Mm,
tell them. I mean, that could include death. We don't want that to happen to anybody who works for our company. We share a really good video made by Lexus of all videos that we have found. We used to show a video of like this girl getting on her phone and she's checking something out, and then she gets into an accident and rolls over and blood splatters on the windshield. And it's sobering and it's all that, but you know, it's just too much of a bummer. We found this
mm,
one by Lexus where it whites out the glass. So for 4.6 seconds, which they say is the average time that someone will spend looking at a phone to check a text or a message, it makes their windows unable to see out all of the glass. So while they're driving and they don't know what's going to happen, and they're going through a road course and trying to do some stuff, they just black out the windows for 4.6 seconds. And of course, they're all over the road. They're hitting things. They're running over like these fake, people, bicyclists, whatever. And it's a really good video. I wish I could share it here. Maybe I'll cut it in and share it in the video itself. But um, we tell our drivers that they need to be safe on the road. That their job, their number one job when they're behind the wheel, is to drive, even if they were hired to do something else.
yeah.
Um,
How
and
do
we tell
you
them,
keep up with the ongoing training? So, like when they arrive, you stress it really hard, and then I think sometimes things fade with time and people get complacent. How do you keep it fresh for them?
yeah, so we do a lot of training. So, we talk about it, new hire orientation. We do the new hire training behind the wheel and classroom. And then we keep that going with um, monthly training videos through our safety provider. We have a safety blast that goes out every other week. Health and safety is sending one for trips and falls and being safe in buildings the off week. We have a safe driving work week every quarter, so they
Mm,
get a daily safety blast that just sort of always talks about it. And the reason we spend so much time putting this information out there is to develop that culture of safety, right? Just make it a part of what they're thinking about all the time.
right.
um, Instead of waiting until they've had a preventable accident and then give them a training session. Hey, you know what you did wrong? Maybe do this. Well, give that to them first, right? Don't let the accident happen. And of course, we do monitor MVRs. We do training as a result of that. But everything that we do is to try and make the driver better, not try and punish them for being bad.
Yeah.
yeah. And as far as a message that I would give to any driver is, listen, the most important thing you do is you go home. You could be the best employee your company has ever hired. You could be, you know, great family person. You are just killing it. You're doing great. But if you lose your life in a car wreck, it all ends. And the thing of it is, crashes happen in, Bob was saying in 4.6 seconds, but I reconstruct crashes. I will chart the vehicles, and if people could get a half a second back, even a quarter second back, they miss. Everybody goes home. It's that fast. And how many
Wow.
seconds do people give away to distraction? And so that's my big concern. You can go a long distance. I mean, so 65 miles per hour is what, 88 feet per second? 90, no, 91 feet. I'll have to do the math. 65 times 1.467. That'll give you feet per second. But anyway, you look down for a few seconds. Guess what? You've gone the length of a football field without looking, without paying attention. So that is just totally unsafe. I would just tell people, listen, and as Bob said, when you're driving, drive. That's your job. That's your job when you're behind the wheel. Drive. right? And if and
Mm-hmm.
anything that's distracting you, you need to stop. Including
Right.
conversations with other drivers or other passengers and things like that. My kids knew if I had to say these words, "Do I need to stop this car?" They would stop whatever they were doing, because I stopped the car once and I can get pretty loud. But that's why I suggest for all parents, put your children in the trunk. That's a joke. Don't put your children in the trunk.
This is now about to be the #1 episode. No.
But, don't put your kids in the trunk. But it's anything that's distracting, you just have to put it away, not do it, and then so that's for all drivers. That's my message. Is just when you're driving, drive. Done.
Right, right. Since we're going into 2020, I'm at 2023 now. I'm
Yes.
curious about, trends that you're seeing, what topics you think deserve more attention. Where would you like to see the industry go next year and beyond?
I think the trend that we're seeing is still distraction. That's the biggest thing that's happening right now. As Phil said, the impairment, I think coming with, obviously there's always been the drinking impairment, but self-medicating or even just legalized marijuana is going to become a huge, issue. Um, those are some of the things, but on the positive side, technology, technology is coming into play and it's going to help. It's not the be all and end all, but what we try and tell people is when you're driving, you're the one that's driving. You're the one that needs to make sure you're doing it right. Technology will help, and there's good technology coming, um, and maybe that will be a positive thing.
Yeah, I'd say that again, well, my big concern going into the next couple of years is going to be, well, always is distraction, but the impairment thing is just it's bothering me because I see some really bad trends starting, and it does deal with impairment from marijuana. It's not even the smoking and the vaping; it's the eating, the edibles and things like that. So I think it's going to exceed alcohol impairment.
Where do you see companies filling the gaps or innovating to help support some of these future problems, current problems?
Well, I think software like what Truce provides is one thing. That's so we can start combating the distraction from the electronics. But as far as
Are
again,
any
it's just
fleets using like an impairment like app or something where you breathe into something before you can
that's the
drive
problem with
or
marijuana. Yeah, that's the problem with marijuana, Bethany, is that they don't have
yeah.
anything yet. So there's going to be like a saliva test that they're working on, but
Hmm.
it's not there yet. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
challenged in the courts because attorneys make a lot of money, and not saying that that's the wrong thing. People always need to be represented, but there are going to be some pretty unscrupulous people making a lot of money on just fighting the testing that's going to come about for marijuana impairment. But we're not there yet, and that again. There's my concern regarding that one. But companies just need to say, hey, and be very clear and strict. For lack of a better way of putting it, I was going to say blunt, but this doesn't have to be blunt. It just has to be, like here are our policies, and these will not be swayed from. This is what happens. So I worked for a pharmaceutical there for a few years, and that was the policy that we had put in place, and it addressed alcohol and any medications, over the counter, illicit drugs, and then also legalized and recreational marijuana. And the thing of it is too is with that is that it's not only just becoming legalized; it's becoming normalized.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay, that you know. Funny, I was having a lunch the other day with some people, and they were talking about how you know their kids were smoking grass in the basement. Well, I mean, my dad would have had us eating off the mantle for a month because we wouldn't have been able to sit down if we had done anything like that. But you see, so it's becoming more normalized. It's like the kid that sipped, took a sip of dad's vodka. Well, now they're sparking up, down the basement. So it's and then they get behind the wheel. And most of the time, when I arrested people for marijuana impairment, it wasn't just marijuana; it was marijuana and alcohol. So again, companies need to address this. Organizations need to address this with the people, the drivers that they manage, and they have to get progressive and aggressive with that.
Yeah, ahead of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
I want to touch on that though too, Phil. You're bringing up a good point about companies need to have a strong policy regarding marijuana because so many states are legalizing it. Canada, the country, has legalized it.
Cool.
If all states legalize it in the states, we're going to have nationwide legalization. That makes it difficult to enforce something in the workplace, right? You used to have a drug-free workplace, right? You could not be under the influence of anything, but now it's legalized. It stays in your system longer. So companies are getting more laxed with their policy, but they need to stay strong with their fleet policy. At no time should you ever be under the influence of medication, marijuana, alcohol. It's the workplace. The vehicle is the workplace, and they have to have strong policy there. They can be laxed on other things because it's legal for either medicinal or just recreation, but not behind the wheel.
Right.
Thanks for that. So it sounds like you have to have quite the backbone in a role like yours. And you've talked about some fleet managers being like, safety's not my job. I don't handle that. And you said, let's see, I liked what you said. If it's not your job, make it your job. So what would you recommend to someone who's in a hostile environment towards safety? And what makes a true safety leader tick and
Go
persevere?
ahead, Phil.
Well, so I was in a situation where I came to work for a pharma that had pretty much no safety culture, and you have to do it. You have to be smart, So become allies with legal and with HR. And then also you have to get the C-suite on board. But I would suggest doing it first with legal and HR because they have a tendency of listening to those folks. And if you don't have, true. If you don't have, listen, if it's not important to the boss, it's not going to be important to the troops, right? So you have to make sure that all levels of management are on board with this. Bob's company, I saw that firsthand. The CEO of the company Bob works for actually went through the training, and so that's what a great example, So
yeah,
that's really I think it's important that you start developing those relationships as soon as if you're a safety person, you can't do it on your own. You have to have everybody on board to create. And as Bob said, you have to create that culture.
Right. Far too often, companies are creating that culture after something happens. So what you need to do is just be that person that's going to stand up and say, we don't want to have to do this after someone dies. We want to do it before. I really like the idea of going to legal and HR because the C-suite will listen to legal and HR. If you have a risk department and there's going to be any kind of liability, have them get involved and they will definitely support it. Get people on your side and then take it to the C-suite and then take it to first level management and higher management to make it happen. The safety policy that we go through, the series that we had really talked about that in depth. Develop a safety committee, do something, get everybody involved, have them talk about it, have them all be at the table, helping develop it. You don't have to do it on your own, but you have to bring it up and get people on board.
Yeah. What about from the ground up? Any suggestions for engaging at the grassroots level as well?
Within an organization?
Yeah.
I mean, the grassroots is going to be a driver, maybe unhappy with, things not being safe. That could be anything from, back to the old union days when people were in unsafe work environments and hands were getting, chopped off and fingers were getting missing. They're going to scream for safety. If somebody feels that they're in an unsafe work environment, they're probably going to bring it up. They're probably going to bring it up with the person who's putting them in that situation. And if they're in an unsafe vehicle or there's unsafe practices, they're probably going to go to the fleet manager. But I think if you're a new fleet manager and you're not really, used to this, talk to your peers, talk to others, learn more about what's going on, but make safety a part of it. That's just got to be a part of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. What I found too, Bethany, is that, and I work for a training company. So what I
Mm-hmm.
found is that, there's pushback from the drivers sometimes, like, but then once they go through it, they're going, okay, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I can tell you, firsthand experience in that when I put drivers, when I was working with a pharma company, I put them through the training. I saved all the emails like, hey, thank you for this. We appreciate it. I mean, they realize that this is not some kind of a punishment. They need to understand, again, what I said about talking to a driver, saying the most important thing you do is you go home today. And if they get that the whole, it's okay. So one of the biggest expenses that organizations have are crashes, especially in this country. I mean, we are a litigious society, but you can say, well, that's, okay, if they think, well, that's the only reason you're doing it, you're not going to succeed. You have to understand that they need to understand that the reason you're doing is because you're absolutely concerned for their safety.
That's right.
You absolutely want them to get home safe every day. That is the main reason for it. All that other stuff, that helps, right? I mean, saving the bucks, but it's the welfare of the employee is what you're looking out for.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Great point. Well said. So as we wrap up here, a fun question. So Phil, you were on the police force. So if you guys were playing police on TV, I want to know who's the good cop and who's the bad cop. I have my theories, but
I don't know. I think we're both a couple of softies. He's the cop. So
I'm not.
he,
I'm pretty hard line.
I don't know. I could see you come over and pulling me over and being all happy about it. Come on, I ride the motorcycle.
Come on, Bob.
I got to be the
oh,
badass, right?
okay. So a little both.
Well, we both be bad cop, bad cop. I mean,
I want to see that show.
I know.
And again, yeah, listen, I was intolerant of certain things on the police department. I once said to my dad, if I'd ever caught you drunk driving, you'd be handcuffed, Dad. And he said, I know it. So there were certain things. Now, listen, I got to tell you, I was a softie in some things. If I saw you stop somebody for speeding and it's right around this time of year, going into the holidays, and I stop them and I see they have, 3 car seats in the back, I'm going, yeah, I'm not giving this person a ticket. Now, what's going to happen now? People are just going to go out and get a bunch of car seats and throw them in their car. But I mean,
I was just thinking to myself, that's genius.
Yeah, but no, I'm what I said earlier about the policy, and that you have to have a good, safe, solid policy in place. And Bob, you mentioned, make sure risk management's involved. Also, absolutely, to get risk, HR, legal, everybody involved. And then once you have that policy in place, everybody signed off on it, adhere to it. So in that sense, that you have to strictly adhere. I guess Bob and I would both be bad cops in that sense. If they think that's being a bad cop doing that, so be it.
Yeah.
We're bad cops because we care about people's safety, so that makes us good cops. But when it comes down to it, we've all heard angry Phil, so I'm going to put it all on Phil.
Oh my gosh. So this is my last question. I know we're already over time, but is there can you give us a little preview of some topics you're going to cover in future episodes?
So I'm looking forward to, we'll call it season 2. We started this one. We'll make it season 1. I think we started in May. This is our 21st episode. It's been a lot of fun. I think the new year will just be season 2 and we'll start over. Phil's come up with a few ideas. Phil, do you have any previews you want to give?
Yeah, so I mean, just simple things. I mean, we've covered, vehicle maintenance and everything, but we're talking about having somebody from, tire manufacturer, like I'm talking about top. It's just, and that sounds really dry, but if you think about it, the only thing that is between your road and the vehicle are the tires, right? So they're pretty important. We'll talk about that, and then we talked to also lady who's the senior director of one of the best safety organizations in the country. We're going to have her on as a guest, and so we're looking forward to having some more guests on. And then again, we always say we want to be seasonal and topical. So if something pops up that is a hot button issue, we're going to cover that. But and there are things that need to be repeated, just like as we're right now. I think every episode we say don't drive distracted. I mean, we beat people up on that, and you know what? We cannot say it enough.
Right.
You know.
One thing that we have talked about doing, and we have to figure out how to do it, is maybe do a live podcast at a conference.
Ooh,
So
love that.
have anybody come over to our table and just be a part of it, talk about what's on their minds, what they're doing about safety, and just doing it live. Now, of course, it'll be recorded and then it'll, be rebroadcast, from a live recording. But I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you've got lots in store. I can't wait to listen next season, and I really appreciate you guys' time and answers. It's been a pleasure and a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out to us. Thanks for being the fangirl.
Well, we have one.
That's yeah, we have one. Yay. But no, really excited. And I know that you said you're going to share this on your blog. Do you want to say what your blog is or any social media that Truce has?
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel as well, and it's truthsoftware.com is our website. We have a blog on there. So you'll see some content from this podcast come out and an article kind of recapping our conversation. So
Well, that's great. We'll put it in the description in YouTube and anybody on any of the popular podcast platforms just heard that. So hopefully they'll go there and see that and watch that and learn more about Truce. But thank you so much for reaching out to us and interviewing us on our podcast. That was made for a fun episode. So thank you
yeah,
so much. I appreciate it.
you're so
Thanks.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to sign off. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe. If you're on your popular podcast platform, make sure you're subscribing so that you can be notified of future episodes. And again, thank you so much. Everybody have a happy holidays, and we'll talk soon.